Thanks for watching another episode of That Sports Podcast. I am Brandon, your host. As you can see, for those returning to the show, Anthony is no longer with us. We had some creative differences, so we decided that we were going to, go our separate ways. He's going to go work on other projects. I think he had like a TV show that he's working on and stuff like that. He does reporting for local New Jersey sports, so he's off to other things and focusing on other things. I'm going to carry on with the podcast. Anyway, so for our first topic tonight, we are going to talk about Colin Kaepernick and why he's not getting another chance in the NFL. Every time a team seems to need a quarterback, his name is thrown out there, and quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing his name. I mean, it's not that I can't appreciate that, he was sticking up for what he believed in, doing what he thought was right and everything like that, but at the end of the day, actions have consequences, and his popularity waned with everything that happened. So let's back it up to, let's start right when they went to the year they went to the Super Bowl, right? The 49ers were playing well and stuff like that, but Colin Kaepernick was still only ranked 20th out of active quarterbacks in the NFL. And to put that in perspective, he was right ahead of Geno Smith and right behind RG3 in that performance ranking. And where's Geno Smith and where's RG3? Neither one of them are starters in the NFL right now. They're backup quarterbacks, the same type of quarterback, mobile with a big arm and stuff like that, and can't necessarily play out of the pocket. And that's why that's part of the reason that Colin Kaepernick, I say that he's not that great of a quarterback, right? Like, I'm not saying that he's not a backup quarterback. I'm not saying that he can't be a quarterback in the NFL. I'm saying that he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's not he's not somebody that a team is going to want to take into the future. Right? He's been out of the league for how long? He's never made a Pro Bowl. In his second season in throwing over 3,000 yards, he threw for 19 touchdowns on 10 interceptions. And then after that, everything's like his career went on the decline. Right? Like his performance declined and then his popularity declined. I mean, people like to gloss over the fact that he said some ignorant stuff about, Fidel Castro, which upset a lot of people in the Cuban community, the Hispanic community, and shit like that. And, honestly, to me, that was one of the first things that really started to help him lose his popularity was that whole issue where, he, praised Fidel Castro and stuff like that. And, Kiko Alonso, the Miami linebacker, said that, there was bad blood because of it. His father was exiled from Cuba and stuff like that. So, I mean, like, he said some ignorant stuff and done some stuff, prior to, that whole kneeling thing. And then there was rumblings in the locker room because the team wasn't playing well. And then all of a sudden he starts kneeling. Right, and he's doing this protest and stuff like that. He finds himself benched in favor of Blaine Gabbert. And, the 49ers are just a dumpster fire at that point. It's a media circus because now Colin Kaepernick has made half of the fans mad because he's kneeling. Then part of the fans, the half of the crowd that's mad that he's kneeling is mad because they're losing games. And he seems to be focused on more off-the-field issues than on-the-field issues and stuff like that, right? He doesn't seem to care too much about his starting job. Right, he's more focused on kneeling and everything like that. So people were just like, we're done with the 49ers. We're going to be done with him as long as he's there. Right, and I mean, people like to dismiss the fact that, owners have other mouths to feed. Right, let's say that, some team does take a risk on him. Now you have the media storm, the circus that comes with that, right? All the questions and all the people who are upset about him kneeling during the national anthem and stuff like that. All the players who didn't forget, all the people who forgot, that he pretty much, I don't want to say gave up on the 49ers, but he was focused more on these social issues than he was on football at the time, right? So now you have all those people. Then you have, the people who are going to watch the games and be sitting there going, well, if he doesn't perform well, then what are we watching the games for? If the team loses and stuff, right? So all of that causes problems for a team, right? And it can impact them in the financial front. And they have more than just these NFL salaries to work, these players' salaries to worry about. They're the people who work the stadiums, the front office staff, the scouts. There's all types of people involved in putting on our Sunday games and putting on these Sunday games that we love to watch and stuff like that these owners have to think about. And when you have a player like Colin Kaepernick who could eventually negatively impact the bottom line just by signing him, I mean, imagine if some people were like, oh, well, we're not rooting for the team, we're not going to tune in and shit like that. That's 10% revenue loss. Then all of a sudden the team starts losing the first couple games, the first 4 or 5 games. Now there's public outcry and stuff like that. They want him benched, they want him off the team, whatever, and stuff like that. And it's just a problem. It's just a continuing problem. And there's no upside to signing Colin Kaepernick. He's been out of the game too long. Right? We see the videos of him throwing footballs and stuff like that. But anybody who's played football at a high level, anyone who's played football at a high level like that can get out on a field and throw the ball with nothing on the line, no pressure and stuff like that. How's he going to react when he gets into the game? I understand that he's been keeping in shape and stuff like that, but keeping in shape is different than actually playing the game of football. It's different. There's no pass rushers. There's no wide receivers being guarded by cornerbacks and safeties and stuff like that. He's not having to read defenses and figure out what these new schemes are, right? He's just out there working out throwing the ball. And I get it. Oh, he still looks good. He's still got a good arm and everything like that. I'm sure Brett Favre can still heave the ball pretty far too. Does that mean that he should be still playing? No. My point is that at the end of the day, there is no upside in signing Colin Kaepernick because he's not that great of a player. Never signed to a Pro Bowl. His career stats aren't that great. He's a middle of the pack quarterback with no potential upside and nothing but everything for a team to lose, and that's why he's not getting a chance. It's not because he's getting blackballed from the NFL or anything like that. The simple truth of the matter is him and Ray Rice are both not playing football because of public outcry. Ray Rice hit his wife. He was forthcoming with all the information. Right? The NFL suspended him for 4 games. Then all of a sudden the videotape came out of him hitting his wife, and the NFL had to reverse their course. Why? Because of the public outcry. The NFL, just like any owner who hears Colin Kaepernick's name get thrown around in conversation, has to sit there and has to do a cost-benefit analysis and weigh the pros and the cons. And with Colin Kaepernick, the cons far outweigh the pros. Right? Like if he was a 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback who won the Super Bowl MVP and won a championship and stuff like that, he'd still be playing now. People will easily forgive a winner more than they'll forgive a loser. And Colin Kaepernick, I'm not saying he's a loser, but he wasn't winning games. He wasn't winning football games. He got benched for Blaine Gabbert, and that's why he's not playing. It's as simple as that. It's a cost-benefit analysis and stuff like that. And I understand that, it's not fair because he was doing something he believed in and everything like that. But there's a time and a place for all of that stuff. These pro athletes, they command more attention than any normal average human being on the planet. All they have to do is get on their social media accounts and tweet something out, post something on Facebook, Instagram, and automatically they have millions of eyes on it. He could have paid somebody $100,000 a year to start a social media campaign, to run a website and stuff like that, bringing awareness to all these different events and stuff like that, collecting donations and everything to send to different people to help out different families and stuff. But instead, he wanted to make it personal and get out on the field and kneel and stuff like that. And quite frankly, I understand both sides of the story there, right? I understand why people were upset, but I also understand that a lot of people were overreacting. But at the same time, I could say that about a lot of different things that people hold sacred to them. It's just like when people are praying or eating or going to church, and people consider that a holy, reverent time and stuff like that. You don't play around in church. You don't play around when people are praying. You don't play around during a moment of silence and stuff like that. It's just something you don't do, right? Because people hold that time sacred. There's a reverence to that. So I understand both sides of that coin. But at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick did what he thought was right. And now he has to live with the consequences of that. If he hadn't done all that kneeling and stuff like that, and carried out his social justice causes and stuff like that in a different manner, he'd still be playing. If he was winning football games and was kneeling during the national anthem, if the team was on the way to the Super Bowl and he was kneeling during the national anthem, people would have been able to forgive that, overlook it. And I understand that, like I said, that doesn't sound like it's fair. It might sound like it's messed up. But that's the way people are. That's the way society is. We're never going to get into a society where somebody's going to do something and 100% of people are going to enjoy it, right? Even the president of the United States doesn't have a 100% approval rating. At best, he's got a little more than half of public approval rating, no matter what he does. So at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick and all the rest of these athletes who find themselves bounced out of the league because they bring negative publicity on themselves and stuff like that, they have never nothing, no one to blame but themselves for their actions. And while, like I said, I do applaud him for sticking to his guns and fighting for something he believes in. Sometimes you just have to let those things go and move on. Anyway, next topic. Lia Thomas and the NCAA swimming championship and all that good stuff. Before I get into this segment, I want to say this: I have no problem with transgender people living their best lives. Right? If being transgender is what's going to help you be the most you can be and be all that you can be and be happy and live a fulfilled life, then that's what people need. That's what needs to happen for those people. Right? And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with you identifying as whatever you want to identify as. If you want to identify as a tree, cool. Right? But at the end of the day, I don't believe that Lia Thomas competing against cisgendered women was fair. And this isn't a personal bias, right? I've played sports in high school. I've played sports in rec league. I played club soccer in college for a spell, and I believe in the fairness of competition and sports, which is why you have men and women's sports divided, right? Because men and women, while they're equal as human beings, they're not equal biologically. Men have a natural advantage because men produce testosterone. Testosterone is a growth hormone. It stimulates bone growth, muscle growth, just growth overall in the human body. Now, every man doesn't produce testosterone the same way. Genetics play a factor and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, on average, men grow to be taller, faster, and stronger than women. And this is not a sexist thing. This is a biological thing. This is a scientifically proven statement of fact. You can look it up. When you compare the statistics between men's and women's Olympic sports, the ones that they do that are both pretty much the same, men do perform better. Their stats are a little bit better. When you look at sprints, when you look at the 100-meter sprint, I believe like the men's fastest time is like 9.58 seconds, whereas the women's fastest time is like 10 point something seconds. That's the fastest man and the fastest woman in the world. Those are the speed times for those people, the fastest people in the world. And you go down the list all the way down to the hammer throw, shot put, and all that stuff. Men are outperforming the women. So if you had men and women competing against each other in those individual sports, men would more often than not win them. Now, I'm not saying that women aren't as good as men. And I'm not saying that women aren't competent at sports. What I'm saying is that men are a little bit faster. Men are a little bit stronger. Men are a little bit taller. And when you think about how that affects sports, it affects all sports pretty much. The fastest sprinters in the world are relatively taller people, right? The fastest pro basketball players are generally the tallest people of men and women. Shorter people don't normally make it into the higher competitive levels of most sports because they get beat out by the bigger, faster, stronger people. Now, how does that portray to Lia Thomas? Lia Thomas spent 20 plus years of her life as a man. She was born a man. She was producing testosterone. She was training as a man. She was competing as a man. So her body was fully developed and fine-tuned, trying to be a male competitive athlete. Then all of a sudden, Lia wants to transition into being a woman, and now she goes from being like ranked 400 in the country to now ranked number 1 in women's swimming. Right? And you can't tell me that that's a coincidence, or that, that has no bearing in the sport. That has no relevance in the sport, because it does. It 100% has a relevance in the sport. And that's why I believe it's not fair. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, transgender people shouldn't be allowed to compete and this, that, and the third. She should have been allowed to compete. But her times should not have been official. They shouldn't have affected the official rankings and stuff like that. Because Lia Thomas was born with an unnatural edge. And I'm not saying that's unnatural to human beings. I'm saying it's unnatural to women. Most women do not get to be the size of Lia Thomas. The average woman does not get to be that big. Brittany Griner, I believe, is what, 6'9"? She's the biggest female the tall, the big. I believe she's the biggest WNBA player on the WNBA rosters. She's about the size of Lia Thomas. How many other women? There's not a lot of women who reach that height, that size, and that build. And again, not saying that transgender women should not be able to compete. My solution would be to have an open league where men and women can compete. Have co-ed sports all the way up through college, where gender doesn't matter. Nobody has to identify as any gender. That way, people who are non-binary can commit to playing sports, right? That way, transgender men can go out there and compete in sports. And there's a level of fair. The playing field is level. You know you'll be competing against men. You know you'll be competing against women. You know you'll be competing against transgenders and stuff like that. There's no surprises. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to speak for all women, but I can honestly tell you that there are a lot of women out there who are competing for that national title who feel slighted. Because Lia Thomas is not a natural woman. She was a natural born man that transitioned into a woman. And as far as I know, all of that hormone therapy and stuff like that, the hormones that they take and stuff, that stuff does not negate all the biological changes that happen after you've hit puberty. Not all trans people transition at the same time. So at the end of the day, I don't believe that her competing and winning a national title was fair to cisgendered women. I believe that she should have been able to swim. I believe she should have been able to compete, but none of her time should have been official. None of that should have been recorded and gone into the official stat books and stuff like that. She should have been able to allow to participate, but that's it. That is 100% it. And I believe that the call for open leagues is getting bigger. The demand is out there, and I think it needs to happen. Because there are transgender people are people, and they want to compete in sports. They want to do something other than sit around and watch other people play sports. And if there's a league for them to play in, we can have the men's league, we can have the women's league, and then there's the open league. That's inclusive to everybody. It's not excluding everybody. Anyway, that is my 2 cents on that subject. And like I said, I don't believe that I'm not here to, bash transgenders or nothing like that, but I do believe that, there should be a league out there for them to compete in. Anyway, so Conor McGregor is eyeing his comeback sometime, in the next, I would say like 6 months, right? He's looking to make his comeback within the next 6 months before the end of the year. And he's called out Kamaru Usman, right? And do I believe that he should get a title shot against Kamaru Usman? No. I don't believe he should have got the rematch against Dustin Poirier. Right? Like, the only reason he got the Dustin Poirier rematch was because Conor McGregor is a big name. He's notorious with fans. People either love him or hate him. No matter what, he's got eyes on him. He built that $1 billion whiskey brand, then sold it off. I mean, the guy just has had a lot the guy has a lot of eyes on him at all times. And that's why he got that Dustin Poirier rematch, was because the UFC knew that it would be a big draw, that they could get the viewers and the fans behind it and stuff like that. And it wasn't necessarily because he deserved another shot. It didn't necessarily be because he deserved a chance to be in title contention. It was simply because of his name and the legacy he's built up. Now, if Kamaru Usman were to fight Conor McGregor, I feel like it would be a one-sided fight, because Conor McGregor, to me, looks like he's on the decline, right? The fight doesn't make any sense. Out of his last 4 fights, he's lost 3 of them. 5 fights total. The first one went against Donald Cerrone. The next one was against, I believe, Nate Diaz, in which he lost. Then he fought Nate Diaz again and won. Then he fought Dustin Poirier and lost. And then he fought Dustin Poirier again and lost. So out of all those fights, out of 5 fights, he's won 2 and lost 3. If he was any other run-of-the-mill, if he was any other fighter right now, he'd be looking at probably getting bounced out of the UFC, right? And I understand that people want to say, oh, he broke his leg, that shouldn't count and stuff like that. But a loss is a loss. I'm sorry. He's got to climb back into the win column just like everybody else. There's a lot of fighters out there in the UFC who are they're the top 10 guys in the UFC, right? And in the welterweight division, right? And we're saying that Conor McGregor's going to leapfrog all of those guys because of what? Because he has a name, he has a little bit of status in the community and stuff like that. In my honest opinion, there are guys who actually deserve a shot at Kamaru Usman's title, and Conor McGregor isn't one of them. He fought four times, and they were the same two guys. He's not fighting top competition anymore. All he's trying to do is avenge those losses and stuff like that. And I'll give it to him. He got the one that he dropped from Nate Diaz back, but he still split. And he's still down 2-1 in the trilogy between him and Dustin Poirier. I believe him and Dustin Poirier fought 3 times now, and Dustin Poirier has won 2 out of those 3 times. Conor McGregor's only won once. And again, I'm not saying that Conor McGregor can't fight, but he looks like he's on the decline. And what would make sense to me is a fight between Conor McGregor and Bilal Muhammad, or maybe even a Kazmat Shiov. Because those two guys are up-and-coming fighters. They're very promising guys and everything like that. And if Conor McGregor beats one of those two guys, then I could see him being in talks for being in line to be that next title challenger. But even then, I still say he'd have to get through Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington. I mean, as much as I don't like Colby Covington, he's still one of the top fighters in the welterweight division. Conor McGregor needs to fight some of those guys before I'm on board with the fight. And if I was Kamaru Usman, I would say the same thing. There's no way in hell I'm taking that fight. Conor McGregor has everything to lose, and Conor McGregor has barely anything to gain fighting Conor McGregor. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I don't see that fight happening. I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, I don't see it going well for Conor. Anyway, the Atlanta Falcons parted ways with their longtime quarterback, Matt Ryan, and they gave him away to the Colts for some draft picks. And do I think the Colts are a playoff or a Super Bowl threat? Yes. I do believe that because, first of all, last season they were a 9-8 team. They weren't far off the playoffs. They were hovering around the cusp. And let's be honest, Carson Wentz was wildly unimpressive last season. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either. I mean, he got the job done, but I'm sure there were things that he could have done better or that the Colts would have liked to see him do better, which is why they dealt him out after a year, right? So now you bring in Matt Ryan. Now, I believe that Matt Ryan is a victim of the same circumstances as Matt Stafford, right? 2 great quarterbacks who ended up on teams that just constantly underperform despite the amount of talent that they have on a roster. It's not that the Atlanta Falcons haven't had a good roster or good teams and just have stunk up the joint, but the simple fact of the matter is like they just haven't had everything in sync at the times that they need them to be in sync. Whether it be coaching, whether it be some of the talent, whether it be some of the behind the scenes decisions to bench certain players, trade certain players, whatever the case may be. And then when we saw Matthew Stafford finally get away from the Lions, he had big success. So this could be the same story for Matt Ryan. The Colts haven't been a terrible team, but they've definitely been hovering around being a playoff team and finding some good success. And I think this will be a good opportunity for Matt Ryan to, end his career on a high note. I think he's got at least 3 years left in him, right? Like I said, he's not been playing lights out like he used to back in the day, but he's still a veteran quarterback, still very savvy, can still get the ball downfield, and still can make good decisions with the ball. Now, I know sometimes we might not have seen that in Atlanta, but we have to take into account that, in Atlanta, he wasn't always working with a Julio Jones and, some of those big-name receivers and some of that high-powered offense he had in the past. Sometimes he had to make things happen on his own. And so now with the Colts, I feel like, this might be the situation where, next season they make the playoffs, maybe not a deep run, but they could definitely make the playoffs. They've made some great offseason moves and stuff like that. They seem to be trying to keep some of those core pieces around. And, they've got a bunch of draft picks and stuff. They've got some draft picks and stuff like that, coming up. So at the end of the day, do I think that, they have the opportunity to go into the playoffs and be a Super Bowl, go into the playoffs in this upcoming season and be a Super Bowl threat? Maybe not a Super Bowl threat, but they can definitely make the playoffs. playoffs and maybe the season after, maybe even during the trade deadline, they're doing so well, they make a trade and stuff like that to help them make a deep playoff run push. But at the end of the day, I do see that with this deal, it could put the Colts in position to at least be a playoff contender for the next few seasons until they find that franchise quarterback of the future. And the next topic, Zion Williams. He's done for the season. The Pelicans have hung it up on him, and I've been skeptical about his relationship with the Pelicans so far, right? Like, I can't really tell if he doesn't want to play for them or this injury really is keeping him from playing, right? But something that's been bothering me is the fact that, when we see him in the clips and everything like that, he looks like he's out of basketball shape, or he looked like he was out of basketball shape. I haven't seen pictures of him recently, but and now they're saying that the injury's healing and he's getting back into playing health and everything like that. So what I really want to know is what's next for him. And I think if I'm him or I'm the Pelicans, like, let's say if I'm him, my biggest goal is trying to get back out on the court and prove that I'm still a dominating force in basketball, or that I can be a dominating force in basketball, right? I'm doing everything I can to rehab. If I'm the Pelicans, I'm probably looking to move on, right? Because they've invested so much money so far. They gave away Anthony Davis on the hopes that they were going to have Zion, and so far that hasn't gone the way that they thought, right? And I know that they have a lot of money sunk in him and a lot of investment and everything like that, but at the end of the day, there's some trade value there. People would be interested in taking him, and if the Pelicans really want to, salvage the relationship and, move on from him, I think that the best thing for both parties would be to just trade him and, get a draft pick or get some players in return, and just look somewhere else. Let him go off and do his own thing, because I don't think that he wants to play in New Orleans anymore. Right, there was a report I read just recently that said that he might not even want to play for the Pelicans anymore, and that leads me to believe even more that part of the reason he's been stringing along this rehab and all this kind of stuff is because he just doesn't want to play. He just doesn't want to play for the Pelicans. He doesn't want to play in that arena, that stadium, for that team. They don't play well. They're underperforming team, and now there's all this pressure to be the best and carry the team to a playoff title and stuff like that. So I completely understand why he would want to, go somewhere else where there's other players and he's not necessarily the focal point and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think that, Zion still has a lot left in him. He just needs to get his body and his mind right so he can play some basketball. And, the Pelicans got to figure out what they're going to do with him. All right. Since we're talking about basketball, let's close the show on some basketball talk. So I pulled these stats down a couple days ago. Obviously, they could have changed because, there were some games in between now and then. But overall, the Lakers and the Nets are very underwhelming teams at this point. The Lakers were sitting at 31-34 last I checked, and the Nets were 38-34, just barely above 500. The Lakers are well under 500. And, these teams are dangerously close to looking like they're going to get, bounced out of the playoffs. If the Lakers lose too many games, they could even drop to that 11 seed and not even be in that new playoff tournament for the lower seeds. Same with the Nets. I mean, the Nets are just two spots, from that, from that 10th place spot. So do I think that, the Lakers and Nets make a championship run? I don't see it for either team. With the Nets, I mean, first of all, you have the Bucks that the reigning champs that you still got to get past, who were tied with the Philadelphia 76ers for record. The Miami Heat, the Chicago Bulls, the Cleveland Cavaliers, all six of those teams are playing really well. They're playing good team basketball. They're not out there dropping a lot of games. They're winning the games that they should be able to win. They're losing the games that are, they're losing games, to tight games and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, if Brooklyn does end up making the playoffs and they do into that tournament style thing, like I said, they have to, based on these stats, the Raptors will play the Nets, the Hornets will play the Hawks, and then the winner of the loser of the Nets, the loser of the Raptors and Nets would play the winner of the Raptors and Hawks. I mean the Hornets and the Hawks. And I just don't see the Brooklyn Nets getting past that. And if they do, they still have to make it through a 7-game series with one of those top 6 teams. And I personally don't believe they have the firepower. I think that the season is definitely a loss for them, mostly due to Kyrie Irving not playing, and that whole missing out on the chemistry and stuff like that. Now it's going to be a tough sled to win that championship, and I just don't see him doing it. The Lakers, same thing. People talk about LeBron James being the best player in the NBA and stuff like that. Well, how come the Lakers, even with the best player in the NBA, are still only ranked ninth? I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's, in my opinion, the best player in the NBA, and the Bucks are in third, right? Who else do the Bucks really have as a big name talent and stuff like that? You don't really hear anybody else out of Milwaukee except Giannis. And in my mind, he's the best player. He's the one. He's the one that carries his team, changes the dynamic and stuff like that. I don't see that for LeBron James. With the Lakers, you got Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and, just a tremendous amount of talent out there that's doing absolutely nothing but laying up goose eggs and stuff like that. So, so, at the end of the day, I just don't see it for the Lakers either. Maybe next season, but, for now, I don't see the Nets and the Lakers, making that playoff run. I know now there's less than 10 games. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers get bounced out of the playoffs completely, and the Nets, make, like I said, that playoff and then get eliminated based on that playoff, that tournament style playoff between the 7 through 10 seeds and stuff like that. So, that's how I see it shaking out. Anyway. That is my show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. Check out my other podcast, XYZ Talk Radio. That is streaming on YouTube as well. Like I said, follow me on Twitch. I'm going to be streaming games more. Check out the blog. I have all the three main stories I have today, that I talked about today, the beginning of the show. Those three main stories, those will be posted on the blog as well. I'll leave the links in the comments. Check those out. You can check all the stats and stuff like that. Kind of fact check me and everything. Please feel free to do that. But anyway, again, thanks for watching. Tune in next week for my next episode, my next solo episode. Have a good weekend. Be safe. Peace.